Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about scope. Now when we're talking about scope, this is something that we actually work out very early on in our design process. So in our problem solving methodology we have analysis, design, development and evaluation, and we define our scope as part of our analysis stage. The purpose of this is to say what it is that we're actually going to be making in the project, so that the stakeholders get what it is that they need, and so that we're not developing things that are unneeded. So there are two things that you do when you're stating scope. The first is that you state what will actually be in scope. So sort of you're putting a fence around particular requirements and you're saying these are the things that are going to be delivered. And the other thing you're doing is you're actually making a statement of what is not in scope. Now that might seem crazy because everything else is not in scope, but there might be some things that it's worth saying we're explicitly not doing just because of needing to have clarity among the developers and the stakeholders. So my friend Tony, who's a software developer, says that a lot of his work is actually about the understanding of what it is that the client wants, and getting things in and out of scope is a really good way to do this. So I was reminded of a quote from a John Scalzi book. I think it's from the Head On series, and I'm just going to read it to you so I don't get it wrong. He says, there's an old saying, fast, cheap and good, and you get to pick two. And so I think that that's a good thing to think about when you're talking about scope, is what is it that you actually want, because you're only going to get, you have to pick and choose. Two things that can happen with scope during the course of a project. The first is that we will look at our timeline and realise that we need to take things out of scope, so we need to change that definition of what's in scope and what's out of scope, because we can't deliver things. In the Agile model we talk about a minimum viable product, and that's basically the bare bones thing that we obviously can't cut any more out or it won't be the product. The other thing that occasionally happens is that somebody will want to add items into scope, and this was misunderstood by some people during the practice exam. So if you want the scope to be bigger, that's probably going to push out your timeline or it's going to push out your cost. It comes back to that John Scalzi quote. You can either have fast, good or cheap, and if you ask for more, then you're going to have to pay more one way or the other. A quick word about scope and development models. Certainly in both of them you need to be clear. In both Agile and a waterfall model you do need to be clear about what your scope is, but it's worth keeping in mind that in an Agile model you really actually have multiple scopes for each of your iterations, and so it might allow you a bit more flexibility in terms of saying, well, we can't do it, we'll push it out of the scope for this cycle, but we'll pick it up in the scope for this one, so that we don't actually just have to drop things completely from our scope. We can have multiple scopes going. So I hope that's all useful to you.